Welcome to the supplementary lecture on experiments. I subtitled this Big Ideas Without the Fluff because I want to make clear the fact that I'm intending to give you simple ways of telling in a hurry whether you're looking at an observational study or an experiment, and also a simple way of telling whether an experiment has all of the elements that it should to have a good design. Observational studies and experiments can be distinguished in this way. Observational studies merely observe what is already there. We're trying in an observational study not to change anything. We simply observe. In an experiment, on the other hand, we must always impose at least one condition, and sometimes many. And then we observe what changes occur because of the conditions that we impose. So observational study, attempt to change nothing. Experimental study, change something and see what happens as a result. Now, in an experiment, there are always at least two groups involved. On one group, you must impose a treatment. That's known as the treatment group. The other is known as the control group, and on that group you do not impose any treatment at all. That makes it possible to compare the difference between the treatment group and the control group at the end of the experiment. The principles of design for experiments are these, and there are four. First of all, there must be a treatment. You must impose some condition on the group of individuals known as the treatment group. There must also be a control group. You do not impose those conditions on the other group. Thirdly, a good experiment must always implement the principle of randomization. That means you decide which individuals are in the treatment group and which individuals are in the control group at random. And finally, the principle of replication. Both the treatment and the control group must have enough individuals present that individual variation isn't likely to explain the results that we seek. Let me give you an example of a really simple experiment. Suppose we want to know this. Does fertilizing increase the amount of tomatoes produced by garden plants? Well, in order to answer that question, maybe we decide to choose 12 tomato plants in the same garden area and growing in similar conditions. So soil, sun, water, things like that are all about the same for each of those 12 plants. And furthermore, there has to be a reasonable distance between them so that what we do to one plant doesn't directly affect what we do to the other. Then we randomly select 6 of those 12 plants to be the treatment group. The other 6 will be the control group. For the treatment group, we fertilize the soil around each one of those plants. For the control group, we do not apply the fertilizer. We treat all of the plants in exactly the same way except for the fertilizer, whether they're in the treatment or the control group. Finally, at the end of the experiment, we would weigh the tomato harvest from each group and then compare and make our conclusions. If the treatment group produces more tomatoes, then it's likely we can conclude that the fertilizer caused more tomatoes to grow. And that's a critical difference between an observational study and an experiment. An experiment allows us to make conclusions about what inputs caused a certain output. Now, there's another way we might do this. Instead of an experiment, suppose we decided to proceed by an observational study. Maybe we could talk to several of our friends who are gardeners and raise tomatoes. Some of those would fertilize and some of them don't. Now, suppose those who fertilize tend to harvest more tomatoes than those who don't. Does that mean that fertilizer causes more tomatoes to grow? Well, the answer is no. We can't make that conclusion. Not because fertilizer doesn't help, but because we can't sort out all of the factors. Maybe something else is causing the increase in harvest. For instance, people who take the time to fertilize their plants may also be a little more diligent about keeping up with the weeding. Or maybe people who take the time and go to the expense of fertilizing their plants are also more skillful in the way they water their plants effectively, never letting them get too dry or never drowning them with too much water. Or maybe just by chance, all of the people who fertilize also have better soil for their gardens. See, the problem is we can't tell what the cause is in an observational study because we don't control all of those other factors. We don't know which of these possibly different conditions are the same or different. So for experiments compared to observational studies, the essential difference is, first of all, whether we impose conditions or simply observe what is already there. Observational studies do not do anything to the objects of study. They observe. Experiments, on the other hand, impose conditions and see what develops as an effect. Experiments can be used then to make conclusions about causes and effects. If we're looking for the cause of some effect, we must use an experiment rather than an observational study. We can make cause-effect conclusions from experiments, but we cannot make cause-effect conclusions from observational studies.